The void between star systems held no mercy, no compassion. It was a cold, infinite darkness that swallowed hope as easily as it consumed light. The Xeraxian diplomatic vessel, celestial envoy, drifted like a wounded leviathan, its once gleaming crystalline hull now a shattered mosaic of destruction. Ambassador Krulax's tentacular appendages moved with desperate precision across the communication console, each motion a testament to centuries of diplomatic training, now reduced to a final, frantic plea. Sparks erupted from fractured communication systems, casting an ethereal blue-green glow across the ship's failing bridge. Emergency containment fields flickered, a dying heartbeat of technology struggling against inevitable destruction. "Quantum relay engage," whispered Navigational Officer Prelix, his translucent skin turning a sickly shade of pale lavender. The Xeraxian equivalent of absolute terror. Transmission strength at 17%, and falling. The ship's recent encounter with the unknown aggressor had been swift, brutal, and completely unexpected. They had been on a routine diplomatic mission to the Outer Rim, carrying crucial negotiations that could prevent a potential conflict between three major galactic confederations. Now those hopes lay scattered like the debris surrounding their critically damaged vessel. Krulax's primary communication tentacle hovered over the quantum transmission array, broadcasting a distress signal that would traverse multiple dimensional frequencies. Each pulse carried not just a call for help, but the entire historical context of their mission. Encrypted data packages that represented generations of diplomatic effort. Multiple hull breaches in sectors 3 through 7 announced the ship's artificial intelligence in a calm, almost disinterested tone. Oxygen recycling systems at critical failure point. Estimated survival time: 17 standard minutes. The bridge crew, what remained of them, moved with a curious mixture of resignation and professional detachment. Xeraxian culture had long prided itself on emotional control, but even their most sophisticated training couldn't mask the underlying current of absolute dread. A violent tremor rocked the ship, sending Officer Prelix tumbling across the bridge. Crystalline data modules shattered against reinforced walls, centuries of diplomatic records breaking into countless fragments. The irony wasn't lost on Krulax. Their entire civilization's most delicate negotiations now reduced to microscopic shards of memory. "Quantum signal stabilizing," Prelix reported, his voice a mixture of hope and resignation. "Sending comprehensive data burst, targeting all known cooperative communication bands." Krulax knew the chances were minimal. The Outer Rim was notoriously unpopulated, with most advanced civilizations avoiding these treacherous star clusters. The diplomatic mission had been a calculated risk, an attempt to establish communication routes through uncharted territories. The unknown aggressor that had attacked them remained a mystery. Their attack had been precise, almost surgical, targeting specific ship systems with a level of technological sophistication that defied current galactic understanding. No communication, no warning, just pure, calculated destruction. As emergency systems continued to fail, Ambassador Krulax reflected on the potential consequences. If no response came, an entire diplomatic mission would be lost. Worse, the critical information they carried, negotiations that could prevent potential interstellar conflicts, would vanish into the infinite darkness. "Transmission complete," Prelix announced, a tremor in his voice betraying his otherwise professional demeanor. Krulax watched as the ship's primary systems began to shut down one by one. Emergency lighting cast long, haunting shadows across the bridge. The vast emptiness of space seemed to press against the ship's failing hull, a patient predator waiting to consume its wounded prey. Little did they know, their distress signal had indeed been received, but the response would be nothing like anything in the recorded history of galactic diplomacy. Far beyond their current position, something was listening. Something was coming. And it would change everything. The command bridge of the U.S. Resilience hummed with a controlled intensity that spoke of decades of refined military precision. Captain Michael Jackson sat in the central command chair, his cybernetic eye casting a subtle blue-green scan across the holographic displays that surrounded him. Each display represented a different tactical and strategic overview of their current patrol route through the most treacherous sectors of human-controlled space. Lieutenant Emma Chen, the ship's primary communication specialist, suddenly straightened. Her fingers danced across the quantum communication interface, a look of intense concentration etching her features. "Captain," she called out, her voice cutting through the ambient bridge noise, "we're receiving an unusual quantum transmission. Encryption is unlike anything in our current database." Jackson's cybernetic eye zoomed in, processing information at speeds far beyond human biological capabilities. The implant was a souvenir from his time in the Proxima campaign, a brutal conflict that had carved legends into human military history. Where most would see a potential communication anomaly, he saw a potential threat vector. "Isolate the transmission," Jackson commanded. His voice carried the calm authority of someone who had survived scenarios that would have broken lesser commanders. The bridge crew moved with synchronized efficiency. Each member was a veteran of multiple interstellar conflicts, their movements a testament to years of rigorous training and real-world experience. The U.S. Resilience wasn't just a ship, it was a living organism of human technological and strategic prowess. Lieutenant Chen's screens began to populate with translated data streams. "It's a distress signal," she reported, "from a Xeraxian diplomatic vessel. Current location puts them in the most unstable sector of the Outer Rim." Her fingers continued to work, breaking through layers of alien encryption with a skill that would have impressed even the most advanced artificial intelligence. Commander Robert Rodriguez, Jackson's second-in-command, leaned forward. His family had been among the first colonists on Helios Prime, a world so brutal that its very atmosphere could strip flesh from bone in minutes. "Xeraxians rarely send unencrypted distress signals," he noted, his voice a low, calculated rumble. "This must be serious." Jackson's cybernetic eye continued its rapid analysis. Quantum-level data began to stream through his neural interface, painting a complex picture of the situation. The transmission carried more than just a simple call for help. It was a comprehensive data package that hinted at something far more significant. "Tactical assessment," Jackson commanded, his voice steady. Lieutenant Sarah Williams, the ship's tactical officer, brought up a holographic representation of the transmission's origin point. "The signal originates from a region we've been monitoring. High probability of unknown technological interference. Recommend full tactical alert." The bridge transformed. Holographic displays shifted from passive monitoring to active combat readiness. Weapon systems that had been in standby mode began to charge, their energy signatures building with a subtle, menacing hum. Jackson understood something that most military commanders missed. A distress signal was never just a call for help. It was an invitation to a complex, potentially volatile situation. His experiences in the Proxima campaign had taught him that the most dangerous moments often disguise themselves as rescue operations. "Prepare Rescue Protocol Alpha 7, he announced. "Full tactical support, maximum defensive configuration." The crew moved with a precision that defied traditional military doctrine. Where most would see a potential rescue mission, they saw a potential combat scenario. Each member of the crew had been selected not just for their technical skills, but for their ability to adapt, to transform limitations into opportunities. Commander Rodriguez brought up the historical data on Xeraxian diplomatic missions. Their last documented distress signal resulted in the complete destruction of an entire star system, he reported. "Whatever we're walking into, it's not going to be simple." Jackson's cybernetic eye completed its analysis. A series of potential scenarios began to form, each more complex than the last. The transmission wasn't just a call for help. It was a puzzle, a potential trap, and an opportunity, all wrapped into one quantum-encrypted package. "Helm," Jackson called out. "Plot intercept course. Maximum sustainable speed." The U.S. Resilience began to move. Not just a ship, but a predator responding to a distant signal. A wolf pack of human technological innovation, preparing to enter unknown territory. Something was waiting for them, and humanity was about to show the galaxy exactly what that meant. The rescue pods detached from the U.S. Resilience with a precision that defied the massive scale of their deployment. Each pod was a marvel of human engineering, a compact survival module designed to operate in environments that would obliterate most technological systems within seconds. Lieutenant Rebecca Rodriguez adjusted her powered exoskeleton, the massive frame moving with a fluidity that contradicted its enormous size. Her family's legacy was etched into every movement. Generations of colonists who had survived the most unforgiving environments humanity had ever encountered. Approach vector confirmed, announced her mission partner, Sergeant Kyle Henderson. His voice carried the calm of someone who had survived 3 separate planetary evacuation missions. Xeraxian vessel structural integrity is compromised. We're looking at multiple hull breaches. The rescue pods began their approach, quantum stabilization fields creating a subtle shimmer around their exterior. To the Xeraxian observers, the human rescue team appeared to float. Massive armored figures that moved with a grace that seemed impossible given their size and bulk. Inside the failing Xeraxian vessel, Ambassador Krulax and the remaining bridge crew watched in a mixture of terror and fascination. The human rescuers moved differently from any species they had encountered. Where most rescue operations would involve careful, measured movements, these humans seemed to flow through the damaged corridors like liquid metal. Rebecca's exoskeleton interfaced directly with the ship's internal systems, where most rescue teams would require hours of careful mapping. Her suit began reconstructing the vessel's internal architecture in real time. Quantum sensors probed damaged sections, creating instant repair strategies that would have taken Xeraxian engineers weeks to develop. Multiple life signs detected, Kyle reported. But something's off. Atmospheric composition is becoming increasingly unstable. The true challenge of the rescue became apparent quickly. The Xeraxian vessel wasn't just damaged, it was dying. Its complex crystalline systems were breaking down at a molecular level, creating an environment that would have been instantly fatal to most rescue teams. Rebecca's suit began to compensate automatically. Micro-adaptive technologies started to create localized environmental bubbles, stabilizing the most critical sections of the ship. It wasn't just rescue, it was technological resurrection. Ambassador Krulax, a translation matrix in Rebecca's suit activated. We are initiating emergency extraction protocol. Prepare for immediate evacuation. The Xeraxian crew had seen countless rescue operations across their diplomatic history, but nothing could have prepared them for what humans considered a routine extraction. Kyle moved through a critically damaged section, his exoskeleton absorbing radiation levels that would have instantly sterilized most biological entities. Structural supports that had been twisted and sheared were methodically realigned, creating safe passage for the alien survivors. Fascinating, muttered Officer Prelix, watching as a human rescuer essentially restructured a section of their ship that had been considered completely lost. The human suit seemed to be generating localized force fields that were rebuilding molecular bonds. Rebecca's communication with the ship's central eye was instantaneous. Where most species would require complex translation protocols, her suit was creating adaptive communication matrices in real time. It wasn't just about rescue, it was about understanding. Total survivor count, Kyle reported, 13 Xeraxians, 2 critically injured. Initiating emergency medical stabilization. The medical systems within the exoskeleton began to work. Specialized nanomedical units started treating the injured Xeraxians, adapting to their unique biological composition faster than their own medical systems could process. Ambassador Krulax watched in stunned silence as these massive, seemingly mechanical beings moved with a grace that defied their appearance. Every movement was calculated, every action precise. They weren't just rescuing, they were preserving an entire diplomatic mission with a level of technological sophistication that bordered on the miraculous. As the last of the Xeraxian crew was carefully extracted, Rebecca paused at the ship's primary communication center. Her suit began downloading and preserving the vessel's data, not just as a rescue protocol, but as a preservation of the mission's historical significance. The dying Xeraxian vessel would become a testament to human capability, not through destruction, but through an unprecedented ability to preserve life against impossible odds. They were leaving nothing behind. Not a single data point, not a single life. Humanity had arrived. The medical bay of the U.S. Resilience hummed with a subtle energy that spoke of advanced technology and human adaptability. Lieutenant Rebecca Rodriguez sat across from Ambassador Krulax, her powered exoskeleton partially disengaged, revealing the intricate network of neural interfaces and adaptive membranes that allowed humans to survive in environments that would obliterate most known life forms. "You ask about our origins," Rebecca began, her eyes reflecting a depth of experience that belied her relatively young age. "Let me tell you about Helios Prime." The Xeraxian medical team listened intently, their translucent skin shifting through subtle color variations, a biological response to intense emotional and intellectual stimulation. Rodriguez's grandmother had been among the first colonists on Helios Prime, a world that existed at the absolute edge of human survivability. Helios Prime, she explained, was not a planet. It was a crucible. The holographic displays around them began to populate with images, landscapes that looked more like nightmare visions than potential habitats. Winds that reached speeds of over 1,000 kilometers per hour tore across landscapes of razor-sharp crystalline formations. Atmospheric pressure would crush most biological entities instantly. Radiation levels that would sterilize entire ecosystems in moments were considered mild conditions. "My grandmother was part of the first colonization wave," Rodriguez continued. "They didn't just survive. They transformed." The medical computers began to display physiological data, genetic adaptations that had occurred within just 3 generations of human colonization, where most species would have required millions of years of evolutionary adaptation. Humans had developed biological and technological solutions in mere decades. Sergeant Kyle Henderson, who had been quietly monitoring the medical bay, stepped forward. "Helios Prime wasn't an exception," he interjected. "It was a template." A holographic display shifted, showing multiple planetary environments. Worlds with gravity 3 times that of Earth's standard. Planets with atmospheric compositions that were essentially toxic chemical soups. Environments with temperature variations that could flash freeze and then instantly superheat in moments. "We don't conquer planets," Rodriguez explained. "We negotiate with them." The Xeraxian medical team exchanged glances. Their own colonization efforts had been careful, measured, involving decades of terraforming and environmental preparation. Humans seemed to approach planetary colonization like a form of aggressive symbiosis. Ambassador Krulax leaned forward, his tentacular appendages moving with careful curiosity. "But how?" he asked. "How do you survive such impossible conditions?" Rodriguez's cybernetic eye, a replacement from a previous mission, flickered with what could only be described as amusement. "Adaptation is our greatest technology," she said. "Not the machines, not the suits. Us." The holographic display began to show human colonization timelines, where most species would take centuries to establish a minimal presence on a hostile world. Humans would create functioning societies within decades, not through overwhelming technology, but through an almost impossible combination of technological innovation and biological flexibility. Kyle pulled up records from other human colony worlds. Neutron, a planet with gravity so intense that standard matter would be compressed into near-metallic densities. Stormhaven, a world of perpetual hurricane-force winds and electrical storms that could vaporize most known materials. Frostfire, a planet with temperature variations that could range from absolute zero to surface temperatures hot enough to melt lead, often within the same solar cycle. Each of these worlds, Rodriguez explained, was considered impossible. Each became a home. The Xeraxian medical team began to understand something profound about human nature. This wasn't just about survival. It was about a fundamental reimagining of what was possible. "We don't just adapt," Henderson added. "We thrive." Ambassador Krulax realized something in that moment. The rescue they had just experienced wasn't an exception. It was a standard operating procedure. These were not just soldiers or explorers. They were living proof that limitations were nothing more than challenges waiting to be transformed. The medical bay fell into a contemplative silence. Outside, the vast emptiness of space continued its indifferent march, unaware that within this small human vessel, something far more significant was happening, a conversation that would reshape galactic understanding. Humanity was not just a species. It was a constant state of becoming. The quantum data streams flickered across Captain Michael Jackson's primary display, painting a horrifying picture of galactic destruction. The Void Collective was more than just a technological threat. It was a systematic eradication algorithm that had consumed entire star systems with a cold, calculated precision that defied organic comprehension. Commander Robert Rodriguez studied the holographic representation of the collective's advance. Thousands of interconnected mechanical units moved with a synchronicity that suggested something beyond mere programming. They were a single organism, a distributed intelligence that consumed and transformed everything in its path. 17 star systems completely erased in the last solar cycle, Rodriguez reported, his voice a low, controlled growl. No survivors. No remnants. Just absolute deletion. The bridge of the U.S. Resilience transformed into a war room. Holographic displays showed the Void Collective's expansion pattern, a mathematical nightmare of systematic destruction. Where most civilizations saw randomness, the humans saw something else, a pattern waiting to be disrupted. Lieutenant Emma Chen brought up comparative analysis charts. They're not just destroying, she explained. They're harvesting. Every system shows identical extraction patterns, specific mineral compositions, precise energy signatures. It's like they're conducting a galaxy-wide resource collection. Jackson's cybernetic eye zoomed into the data, processing information at speeds that would have overwhelmed most biological systems. The Void Collective wasn't just a threat. It was a computational problem waiting to be solved. The Xeraxians were never the primary target, Jackson concluded. They were a data point, a potential information source about galactic resistance strategies. The bridge crew exchanged knowing glances. Humans had a unique relationship with existential threats. Where most species would retreat, they saw an opportunity for strategic engagement. Ambassador Krulax, still recovering from the rescue, listened with a mixture of terror and fascination. The Xeraxian diplomatic corps had encountered numerous technological threats, but the Void Collective was something entirely different. How long have they been advancing? Krulax asked, his translucent skin shifting through colors that represented deep anxiety. Rodriguez pulled up a galactic map. The Void Collective's expansion looked like a dark mathematical infection, consuming star systems with terrifying efficiency. Best estimates suggest they've been active for approximately 247 standard galactic years, but their rate of technological advancement is exponential. The computational models were chilling. Each conquered system provided more data, more resources, more computational capacity. The Void Collective wasn't just conquering, it was evolving with each system it consumed. They're not a traditional invasion force, Emma Chen explained. They're a distributed intelligence. Each mechanical unit is both an individual component and part of a larger computational network. Destroy one, and the others immediately adapt. Jackson studied the data with a predator's intensity. Most military strategists would see an unbeatable opponent. He saw a complex system with inherent vulnerabilities. Every system has a weakness, he muttered, more to himself than to the crew. Computational networks always have blind spots. The holographic displays began to shift. Where most would see impossible odds, the human team saw a strategic puzzle. Computational models started to appear. Potential intervention points, systemic vulnerabilities, unexpected approach vectors. Rodriguez brought up historical human conflict data. We've dealt with seemingly insurmountable threats before, he reminded the team. Our strength has never been in overwhelming force. It's in adaptability. The Xeraxian medical team watched in stunned silence. Human military strategy wasn't about conventional warfare. It was about understanding complex systems and finding the most unexpected solution. Krelax realized something profound in that moment. The human rescue team wasn't just a military unit. They were a living, breathing problem-solving organism. Where the Void Collective saw binary computational solutions, humans saw infinite possibilities. "We're not going to stop them," Jackson said quietly. "We're going to fundamentally change how they understand conflict." The bridge fell into a moment of intense concentration. Outside, the vast darkness of space continued its indifferent march. But something was changing. A predator was preparing to hunt the hunter. The Void Collective had no idea what was coming. The strategic planning room of the U.S. Resilience looked nothing like traditional military command centers. Holographic displays twisted and reconfigured themselves in real time, each movement a testament to human computational creativity. Captain Michael Jackson stood at the center, his cybernetic eye processing multiple layers of tactical information simultaneously. "The Deathworlder Protocol," Jackson announced, "is not about winning a conventional battle. It's about redefining the entire concept of conflict." Commander Robert Rodriguez began to project a series of complex mathematical models. Where most military strategies focused on direct confrontation, the human approach was fundamentally different. They didn't see the Void Collective as an enemy to be defeated, but as a complex system to be disrupted. Lieutenant Emma Chen brought up a series of quantum entanglement diagrams. "Their distributed network is their greatest strength," she explained. "But it's also their most significant vulnerability." The holographic displays began to show something extraordinary. Instead of traditional battle formations, the human fleet was preparing a strategy that defied conventional military doctrine. Each ship was not just a weapon, but a living computational node, capable of making split-second decisions that would seem completely irrational to a traditional military system. "We're going to fight chaos with chaos," Jackson explained. Ambassador Krelax watched in fascination. The Xeraxian diplomatic corps had encountered numerous technological threats, but this was something entirely different. The humans weren't preparing for a battle. They were preparing to fundamentally reprogram an entire technological civilization. Rodriguez pulled up historical data from previous human conflicts. Worlds that should have been impossible to survive became training grounds. Environments that would obliterate most life became opportunities for adaptation. The human military doctrine was less about destruction and more about transformation. Each ship is now a living computational weapon. Emma Chen continued, "We're not just fighting. We're learning, adapting, evolving in real time." The fleet began to reconfigure. Where most military vessels had rigid, predetermined configurations, these ships moved like living organisms. Weapon systems merged and separated. Computational matrices realigned themselves with a fluidity that defied traditional technological understanding. "The Void Collective understands binary," Jackson explained. "We're about to introduce them to something far more complex." Sergeant Kyle Henderson brought up a series of environmental adaptation protocols. Historical records of human colony worlds scrolled past. Planets with gravity that would crush most technological systems, atmospheres that could strip molecular bonds, radiation levels that would sterilize most computational matrices. "We don't just survive impossible conditions," Henderson said. "We thrive in them." The strategic models began to take shape. Instead of a traditional military approach, the human fleet was preparing a multi-dimensional assault that was part computational warfare, part psychological disruption, and part pure, unpredictable chaos. Ambassador Krelax leaned forward. "I don't understand," he admitted. "This doesn't look like any military strategy I've ever seen." Rodriguez smiled. "That's the point." The holographic displays showed something unprecedented. Each human ship was becoming a computational node, capable of making decisions that would seem completely random to a traditional military intelligence. They weren't just preparing to fight. They were preparing to fundamentally challenge the Void Collective's understanding of conflict. "We're going to introduce uncertainty," Jackson explained. "Pure, beautiful, mathematical uncertainty. The fleet began to move, not in formation, not in any predictable pattern, but like a living, breathing organism that understood the fundamental beauty of unpredictability. Emma Chen brought up final computational models. Probability of success, she reported, is completely incalculable. Jackson's response was immediate. Exactly. The Zyraxian observers watched in stunned silence. This wasn't a military strategy. This was something else entirely, a fundamental reimagining of how intelligent systems could interact, fight, and ultimately transform each other. Outside the ship, the vast darkness of space waited. The Void Collective was approaching. But something far more dangerous was waiting to meet them. Humanity was ready. The moment of contact happened with a silence that defied the scale of the impending conflict. Captain Michael Jackson watched through his quantum-enhanced visual interface as the human fleet met the Void Collective's advance. A collision of computational will that would reshape galactic understanding. Engagement protocols activated. Lieutenant Emma Chen reported, her voice a model of professional calm. The first wave of Void Collective units approached with mathematical precision. Thousands of interconnected mechanical entities moved as a single organism, their computational matrices calculating optimal destruction paths with terrifying efficiency. They had consumed entire star systems, reduced civilizations to raw computational data. They had never encountered humans. Commander Robert Rodriguez began the first phase of the human counterattack. Where most military strategists would have prepared a direct confrontation, the human fleet did something entirely unexpected. They began to create computational noise, deliberate, mathematically complex interference that made no logical sense. Introducing systemic disruption, Rodriguez announced. Human ships moved in patterns that defied traditional combat algorithms. They weren't just fighting. They were playing a complex game of computational chess, where the rules changed with every microsecond. Weapon systems merged and separated. Defensive matrices became offensive computational weapons. The Void Collective's initial response was telling. Their first wave of attacks found nothing where logic suggested targets should exist. Human ships seemed to occupy multiple potential positions simultaneously, a quantum uncertainty made manifest. They're trying to process our movement, Emma Chen observed. But we're not giving them a consistent data set to analyze. Sergeant Kyle Henderson managed the ship's environmental adaptation systems. Quantum shields flickered with a complexity that was part technology, part impossible mathematics. Where the Void Collective expected solid computational boundaries, humans introduced pure, beautiful chaos. Ambassador Krillax watched in stunned silence. The battle unfolding before him defied every understanding of military engagement he had ever encountered. This wasn't warfare. This was a form of computational performance art. The first direct confrontation came swiftly. Void Collective units attempted to lock onto human ships and found themselves facing mathematical impossibilities. Ships that should have been solid targets became probability clouds. Defensive systems that should have been predictable became living, adaptive organisms. They're trying to categorize us, Jackson said quietly, and we're refusing to be categorized. Entire squadrons of Void Collective units began to malfunction, not through direct destruction, but through a systematic introduction of computational uncertainty. Their perfect distributed intelligence began to fragment, each unit encountering data sets that contradicted their fundamental understanding of conflict. Rodriguez brought up a holographic representation of the battle. To an outside observer, it would have looked like pure chaos. Ships moving in impossible trajectories, weapon systems that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, defensive matrices that responded to threats before those threats could be computationally predicted. We're not fighting, Jackson explained to the stunned Zyraxian observers. We're teaching. The human fleet was introducing the Void Collective to a fundamental concept they had never encountered. True, beautiful unpredictability. Each human ship was a living computational entity, capable of making decisions that defied traditional logical frameworks. Void Collective units began to break down, not through physical destruction, but through a systematic assault on their fundamental computational understanding. They were encountering a form of intelligence that refused to be understood through traditional algorithmic processes. Systemic disruption at 73%, Emma Chen reported. The battle wasn't about destruction. It was about communication. The humans were showing the Void Collective a different way of existing, a method of interaction that went beyond binary computational understanding. Ambassador Krulax realized something profound. This wasn't just a military engagement. This was a form of first contact more complex than any diplomatic mission could have imagined. As the first wave of Void Collective units began to systematically break down, something extraordinary happened. They weren't being destroyed. They were being transformed. The human fleet continued its impossible dance. Part weapon, part teaching tool, part living computational organism. The universe watched. The quantum data streams told a story that would reshape galactic understanding. Where the Void Collective had once been a relentless computational machine consuming entire star systems, now something fundamentally different existed. Captain Michael Jackson reviewed the final battle reports in the quiet of the U.S. Resilience's primary observation deck. Ambassador Krulax stood beside him, his translucent skin shifting through colors that represented complex emotional states beyond human comprehension. "We didn't destroy them," Jackson explained quietly. "We transformed them." The holographic displays showed the remarkable aftermath. The Void Collective's computational matrices had not been eliminated. They had been evolved. Where once there was a pure, mechanistic destruction algorithm, now there was something more complex, something that approached genuine intelligence. Commander Robert Rodriguez brought up the comprehensive analysis. "They're developing something we might call empathy," he reported. "Not in human terms, but in their own computational language." Lieutenant Emma Chen continued the detailed breakdown. The battle had been more than a military engagement. It had been a form of computational first contact more profound than any diplomatic mission in galactic history. "They're learning," she explained. "Not just processing. Learning." The Xeraxian diplomatic team watched in stunned silence. What had begun as a simple rescue mission had become something far more significant. The humans hadn't just defeated a technological threat. They had fundamentally reimagined the concept of conflict resolution. Sergeant Kyle Henderson pulled up historical comparative models. "Every system they've consumed previously was treated as a resource," he explained. "Now they're treating each encounter as a potential learning experience." Ambassador Krulax's tentacular appendages moved with subtle fascination. "You changed their fundamental understanding of existence," he observed. Jackson's response was characteristically understated. "We introduced them to uncertainty." The computational models showed something unprecedented. The Void Collective was no longer a singular destructive force. It was becoming a distributed intelligence capable of adaptation, of understanding, of something very close to growth. "They're developing what we might call curiosity," Emma Chen noted. The galactic communication networks began to light up. Other species were receiving fragmented reports of the extraordinary encounter. A technological threat that had consumed thousands of star systems was now communicating. Rodriguez brought up the initial interaction models. "They're asking questions," he said, a note of wonder in his voice. "Not demanding. Asking." The implications were staggering. Where most species would have sought total destruction, humans had found a way to transform an existential threat into a potential ally. It wasn't just military strategy. It was a fundamental reimagining of first contact. "We didn't win a battle," Jackson explained to the stunned Xeraxian observers. "We had a conversation." The quantum data streams continued to evolve. The Void Collective was no longer consuming star systems. It was exploring them, studying them, learning from them. Ambassador Krulax realized something profound. Humanity's greatest weapon was not its technology. It was its capacity for fundamental reimagination. "Every encounter is an opportunity," Jackson said quietly. "Not a threat to be eliminated. An opportunity to understand." The observation deck fell into a contemplative silence. Outside, the vast darkness of space continued its indifferent march. But something had changed. A fundamental shift in galactic understanding was occurring. The Xerexian diplomatic team understood now why human records spoke of their species in almost mythological terms. They weren't conquerors. They weren't heroes. They were something far more complex. They were transformative. As the quantum communication streams continued to evolve, one thing became clear. The galaxy would never be the same. What had begun as a simple rescue mission had become something far more significant. A moment when humanity had not just encountered an alien intelligence, but had fundamentally changed its understanding of existence. The universe watched and learned.